The solution to one of bookbinding's most expensive problems has been hiding in your local kebab shop. I'm serious, and it only costs about 16 quid. I think that every beginner bookbinder has had this experience. You've printed your pages, folded the signatures, finished a beautiful sew-up, and then realised you need to trim the edges. And if you've googled how to do that, you already know that the cheap, fast, good triangle in bookbinding is brutal. If you want cheap, use a box cutter and a prayer. It's slow, and it's rarely pretty. I'd say that the middle ground is a heavy-duty guillotine. They are fast, but the cheapest ones tend to set you back around £130, and they'll still leave blade marks on the edge. The gold standard is the traditional book plough. They sit somewhere between the box knife and the guillotine for speed, with a buttery smooth finish. But they've always cost a fortune. There has been a more affordable book plough on the market for a while, and I really do appreciate Jim Palestra trying to make quality equipment more affordable. But it's still $235 plus shipping and tax, which is a lot for what's functionally a blade screwed to a nice bit of wood. So like most people, I just assumed that trimming an edge cleanly was one of those expensive bookbinding problems you had to buy your way out of. Little did I know that the solution was spinning away trimming meat just a few miles from my house. In this video, I'll explain why this is such an expensive problem in the first place. I'll show you the parts I used to make this actually affordable solution, and what I learned testing it on one of the most ridiculous books I've ever bound. Before we get to enjoy our kebab, why is trimming paper so hard? Because it turns out trimming paper is oddly technical. Most blades are double bevel, meaning they're sharpened on both sides, and that's great for basically everything else in the world. It makes the blade stronger, the edge lasts longer, and it's the standard because manufacturers want their blades to stay sharp for as long as possible. But for bookbinding it's terrible, because when you need to cut through a thick stack of paper, a double bevel blade acts like a wedge. The deeper you cut, the more the blade starts pushing sideways, and the cut slowly walks away from the edge. In bookbinding, we call this creep. To get a consistent cut across multiple layers, you need a blade that's flat on one side, a single bevel blade, so that it can ride against the edge of your press without being pushed away. The problem is, almost the entire knife manufacturing industry doesn't make this kind of blade, which means we don't get the advantages of economy of scale. And that's why even the budget commercially available ploughs are expensive. They have to get their blades manufactured to order. I've spent hours of my life searching for affordable single bevel blades. I knew that somewhere some niche industrial process would have to use them, and they'd require cheap replacements. But I couldn't find them. Eventually, I gave up and bought a guillotine. It hurt my wallet, but it did solve my trimming problem. That is, until I promised to bind this 1,320-page fanfic for a friend. This thing is a real tome, easily 3 times the thickness of my guillotine's capacity. So, the search was back on. Thankfully, there have been some major advances since I last looked into this. I found some threads on r/bookbinding. A user named Kilh had found the holy grail of budget blades, electric kebab slicers. They use a circular single bevel blade, and replacement blades cost about £16. This is exactly the kind of niche industrial process I'd been hoping existed. Kilh had 3D printed a housing for it, but didn't feel the design was ready to share yet. Then, Danation over on MakerWorld stepped in with a shareable design. And I've spent the last month testing variations of this with Danation. Their original design used a 100mm blade, but I had trouble sourcing that quickly, so they very kindly released an 80mm version, which I could source a blade for the next day. That said, if you have time to wait for the larger blade, I'd recommend it. From my testing, I found it easier to hold, it was more stable, and the larger diameter means that you don't need to sharpen it as often. I also suggested a couple of small improvements. The first was a way to keep track of the blade edges, so you know which faces you've used already. And the second was a way to grip the blade guard, so that it's easier to remove. Danation was incredibly generous with their time, and they implemented these suggestions far better than I'd have been able to. They're a really gifted designer. For assembly, they suggest E6000 glue to attach the blade to the 3D print. I used superglue on my first attempt, and it fell off after about a week. So yeah, the extra £10 is absolutely worth it. Now, sharpening this is the only scary part. As this is a 360-degree blade, you have to respect it. It can cut you from every angle. Danation designed a 3D printed guide that you can rest a whetstone against to find the correct sharpening angle. The most comfortable method I found was to rest the blade over the edge of a board and gently rotate it against the stone. You won't need many turns, and you don't need to sharpen it often. For context, I only had to change the blade face twice while cutting through this 1,320 page text block. Making the plough is really simple. First, you download the version you want from MakerWorld. If you have a bamboo printer, it should just open right up. I have an old Anycubic 3D printer and used to use Cura, but I had to download Orca Slicer to get the model to load properly. Then you print it out. I had to add a brim to get the blade interface to stick to the bed, but Danation didn't need to do that with his bamboo printer. Once it's printed and you've cleaned up any lumps and bumps, it should all fit together. It's best to test this before gluing on the blade. When you're happy that it all works, then smear on the E6000 and squish the blade against it. I pressed mine and let it cure overnight just to be safe. And that's it. You've got a fully functional book plough. The cut quality is incredible. If you're careful, you can cut an edge that's smooth enough to gild to or paint without any sanding, which is kind of ridiculous, considering this blade costs less than the Kebab it was designed to make for me. So what is the cost? At time of recording, the blade costs just £16. The glue was £10. The 3D print? Well, if you already own a 3D printer, it's about £2.50 worth of PLA. If you need to use a print-on-demand service, the best price I've found so far is £18, but if you know someone with a 3D printer, a case of beer would probably do it. So realistically, if you already have a 3D printer and a suitable glue, it costs just £16. If you need to source everything from scratch, it's just over £40. Even at its most expensive, this is less than a third of the cost of a basic guillotine. And unlike a guillotine, it has an unlimited cut depth, and in my experience, the finish is superior. To finish the setup, you just need a laying press. Or you could DIY one with some clamps and a couple of boards. It just needs to hold the book and act as a straight edge while you trim. But realistically, to get to the trimming stage, you'd have needed to use something like that already. So I didn't include it in the cost breakdown. I've put links to the 3D models and the original Reddit threads in the description. Please go send them some love, because they've done the heavy lifting to make this tool a reality for all of us. I've also included some affiliate links to the parts you'll need. You don't have to use these, but it will help my channel out so that I can keep testing and sharing exciting new bookbinding tools and equipment in the future. And one final word of warning before you go off and make this for yourself. This is a 360-degree razor blade specifically designed to cut meat efficiently, which is, unfortunately, the stuff you're made out of. So handle it with care. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. I'll be back soon with a full video on this 1,300-page manacled bind. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. See you next time.